When I finally drove back onto my property after being gone for several months, I expected to find the same quiet land I had left behind. Instead, what greeted me stopped me cold. Rows of newly built mansions stretched across the area, 12 of them, standing exactly where my trees and open ground used to be. For a moment, I couldn't even process what I was seeing. These weren't just close to my boundary. They were planted directly on my deeded acreage. I walked the perimeter in disbelief, trying to make sense of it all, when I was approached by HOA representatives. They carried themselves with a kind of confidence that suggested they had never been questioned before. They explained that the homes were part of a planned community expansion and spoke as if I had no right to challenge it. Their tone was dismissive, almost rehearsed, as though my ownership meant nothing at all. I didn't argue with them. I didn't raise my voice. I simply listened, taking in every word, already realizing they had stepped into territory they clearly didn't understand. Instead of reacting emotionally, I returned to my office and pulled out the files I had carefully preserved over the years. My deed, the original survey plat, and official county records were all stored neatly in binders. I spread them across my desk and began checking every boundary line in detail. The paperwork left no room for doubt. The land was mine, and the HOA's authority stopped well short of it. From that moment on, I began documenting everything. I took photographs of the mansions from multiple angles, recording precise GPS coordinates. I saved every notice and email sent by the HOA, making sure each one was preserved with its timestamp intact. I even kept a written log of conversations, noting dates and capturing their exact words as accurately as possible. There's a reason this matters. In situations like this, emotion doesn't win disputes. Evidence does. Every deed, every plat, every recorded interaction becomes a piece of a larger chain that can't be ignored. The HOA was relying on intimidation and assumption. I was relying on documented facts that couldn't be argued away. As I organized everything, a calm clarity settled in. They believed they were extending their authority. In reality, they had built 12 mansions on land they had no right to touch. The deeper I went into the records, the clearer the situation became. The HOA's governing documents had been filed decades earlier, and their jurisdiction was precisely defined. Their authority ended at a boundary line that was unmistakable on the original plat. Everything beyond that line was excluded from their subdivision, yet every single one of those mansions sat beyond it. I pulled zoning maps from the county and compared them against the HOA's bylaws. The discrepancy was undeniable. They had no legal authority to approve construction on my property. What they had done wasn't expansion. It was trespassing on a massive scale. As I continued digging, I uncovered an easement clause that made things even clearer. It allowed limited access for utilities, but explicitly prohibited structural development beyond the subdivision's recorded limits. That clause alone was enough to dismantle their entire claim. That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't just dealing with arrogance anymore. I had concrete proof that their entire project rested on land they didn't control. I highlighted key statutes, marked survey coordinates, and assembled everything into a binder that told the story in clear, undeniable terms. The work itself was quiet, almost methodical, but I knew how powerful it was. The HOA had built 12 mansions where they had no right to build, and now the law itself was backing me. They didn't take my silence well. Within weeks, I started receiving notices in the mail, fines for supposed noncompliance, accusations that I was obstructing development, even threats of legal action if I refused to cooperate. None of it had any real foundation, but the tone was aggressive, clearly meant to intimidate. They escalated further by sending work crews onto property. Trucks began arriving. Signs were posted claiming the land fell under HOA jurisdiction, and they even attempted to install temporary fencing around parts of the acreage. I documented everything. Every sign, every crew visit, every attempt to assert control was photographed, logged, and added to my growing file. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating among neighbors. The HOA painted me as a problem, someone trying to block progress. It was a calculated smear campaign designed to isolate me. I didn't respond publicly. I let them talk. I let the claims stack up, knowing each one would eventually serve as evidence of their overreach. Their approach was loud, chaotic, and aggressive. Mine was the opposite, patient, controlled, and deliberate. Every fine they issued, every threat they made, every unauthorized action they took only strengthened the case I was building. They believed they were tightening their grip. In reality, they were constructing a case against themselves with every reckless move. And the louder they became, the more powerful my silence and documentation turned out to be. Once I had fully grasped the extent of their overreach, I moved into a more strategic phase. I hired a licensed surveyor to conduct a fresh survey of the land. The results matched my original records perfectly, confirming that every mansion stood outside the HOA's jurisdiction. That report went straight into my binder alongside everything else. Next, I consulted a title expert to review the full chain of ownership. We traced it back through decades of records. Every transfer was clean, every document consistent. There was no confusion, no ambiguity. The land had always been mine. That report became another critical piece of evidence. I also brought an attorney who specialized in property disputes. Together, we prepared preservation notices to ensure that all evidence, photographs, emails, correspondence, would remain admissible if challenged. On my attorney's advice, I kept communication minimal and shifted everything to written form. At the same time, I continued gathering visual evidence. I documented construction crews, fencing attempts, and signage. Every image was labeled with precise dates and locations. I even recorded video of HOA representatives making claims about jurisdiction, carefully capturing their statements without provoking confrontation. The entire process felt like building something of my own, not with materials, but with documentation. Each report, each photograph, each preserved record added another layer of strength. The HOA believed they were expanding their reach. What I was assembling was a case strong enough to dismantle everything they had built. When the matter finally reached mediation, the atmosphere was tense. The HOA representatives arrived with stacks of paperwork, speaking quickly and trying to overwhelm the room with volume. I remained quiet, my binder in front of me, waiting for the right moment. When it came, I started with the deed. Its language was clear and direct. Then I presented both the original survey and the updated one. The boundary lines were unmistakable, and the mansions were clearly outside them. I followed with zoning laws and the easement clause, each piece reinforcing the same conclusion. The HOA had no authority over my land. Their arguments began to fall apart. They claimed the expansion had been approved, but when asked for documentation, they couldn't produce anything legitimate. Their confidence crumbled under the weight of precise, undeniable evidence. This is where arrogance meets reality. They had relied on intimidation and assumption. I had relied on facts and records. Only one of those holds up under scrutiny. By the time the case reached court, the outcome felt inevitable. Their attorney spoke loudly, but the judge focused on the documents. Each exhibit was reviewed carefully. Each statute was considered. The courtroom grew quieter as the truth became undeniable. The HOA had built 12 mansions on land they never owned. The judgment was clear. The homes had been constructed illegally outside the HOA's jurisdiction. With no legal claim, the court ordered them removed or liquidated. Ultimately, the decision led to auction. Each property was appraised, and the total value was staggering, nearly $18 million. The court ordered the home sold, with proceeds going toward damages, legal costs, and restitution. The HOA, once so confident, now faced financial collapse. Their funds were drained, their reputation destroyed, and their board members held personally responsible. Neighbors would believe the HOA's narrative watched as the homes were listed publicly, stripped of their prestige. The auction notices carried the same clarity as the documents I presented. Clear proof of ownership and consequence. Not long after, the HOA itself dissolved. Without money, without credibility, and without authority, it collapsed under the weight of its own actions. For me, the outcome wasn't about financial gain. It was about restoring a principle. That property rights are not negotiable. Those mansions became symbols of overreach, and their auction was the correction that followed. When everything was finally settled, I walked the land again. The temporary fencing was gone. The signs had disappeared. The silence had returned. The trees along the boundary moved gently in the wind, and the ground felt steady beneath my feet. It was the same land I had always known, but now it carried the weight of what had been defended. Justice hadn't come through anger or confrontation. It came through patience, discipline, and documentation. The HOA had tried to impose authority where none existed, and the law corrected them. Standing there, I realized how fragile property rights can seem when challenged, and how strong they become when properly protected. That understanding is worth sharing. If you appreciate stories like this, make sure to subscribe and share your thoughts. Awareness and preparation remain the strongest defense any property owner can have.